Okay, day 2 at Health and Wellbeing at Work 2026, the Working Wellbeing Podcast. I am joined with the amazing Tiger de Souza. Lovely to meet you in person for the first time.
Well, you too, Matt. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, not a problem. So for those who don't know who you are, including partly myself, because it'd be great to get to know you, who are you and what do you do?
So I'm currently the Exec Director of People at Samaritans. I'm fascinated by the world of kind of inclusion, but also I think being at Samaritans and thinking about the way health and well-being and mental well-being plays out for us societally, as well as what do I then do to support our volunteers and our staff, is a very interesting, different angle and lens to place on it.
Absolutely. How long have you done the job with Samaritans?
Nearly 3 years. So it'll be 3 years in April. So
yeah. And can I ask kind of what brought you to that point? So what's your background? Where
were
you born?
I've had an accidental career.
An accidental career.
Accidental career. I was going to be a lawyer, and then I was sports president at my uni, and then I ended up thinking, my God, sport's amazing. And so I did my master's in sport rather than doing a law conversion. Yeah. And then because I'd been doing and leading on sport at university, I ended up in the volunteering space, knew a lot about volunteering, wrote my dissertation on it. And then my first proper job was at England Netball as head of volunteering. And then my career has just been this weird element of opportunities coming up that have evolved me from being a volunteering specialist to being a wider people professional today.
Interesting. So could you walk me through that a little bit?
Always been in the charity sector pretty much. So I went from England Netball, then I went to youth volunteering charity V, and that was all around how do you mobilise and support young people 16 to 25 to volunteer and do more volunteering and see the benefits for themselves and their wider communities. Then I went from there to NSPCC to be their head of volunteering. And it was whilst I was there that I had a brilliant boss, Siobhan, who said, I see an OD practitioner in you. And it was her that opened my mind and my eyes to building and developing my skills to be a wider people professional.
Yeah.
So then I had a brief foray out of the charity sector at RICS, which was great. I learned a lot. It was a global role. That was kind of part of the attraction, working in a different field. But my heart knew that I always belonged in the charity sector. So from there, I went to National Trust and for the first time picked up an inclusion responsibility there, and have dared to my first exec job at Samaritans.
Oh, nice. It's interesting you say about someone inspired you along the way. We speak to lots of different wellbeing leaders, and one of the things I'm fascinated in is the different career paths and career journeys that lead people into the roles that they find themselves now, and what those moments were. And often it comes down to someone inspiring them, or a mentor, or someone along those lines.
I think there's something amazingly powerful. I think we underestimate the role that we can play with other people, either our direct reports or we come across in the workplace. And yeah, I had a really great couple of conversations where she saw into my soul. There were things that she saw about me, that she knew about my personality, my makeup, and asked me questions that no one had ever asked me before. And I think that was then the catalyst for me then starting to ask myself more questions, which has then led to me doing what I'm doing now. But yeah, it took that one person to see something that, and to, I think, be bold, brave and kind enough to ask me the question. That was a massive unlocker.
So do you try and do that for others now?
I do, yeah. So I meet with my whole directorate. So I've got about 50 odd people in my directorate, and I make sure I have a one-to-one conversation with them once a quarter. It's on Teams because normally, like in the old world, you just go in the office, you just go up and chat to people and have a coffee. You can't really do that so much now.
No.
But yeah, I do make sure I spend time with them, and I got really, really great help from one of my team. I was struggling about how do I structure the conversation, and so she helped me with thinking through, well, what do you want to know? And we ended up with this formula of 3 questions. So I check in to see how they are. And that's both within work and outside of work. I ask them something that they're proud of, that they've delivered, because you don't always know what people are working on. And there are things that I've learned about things that people have delivered that's real eye-opener. And the third thing I ask them is, what's something that you see that I don't see, that I should know about? Because I think the further up you go, the less exposure you have to some of those things. But I think not always, but as a result of those conversations, there are moments when people will open up to you and they will share something with you that you then switch into a coaching mode that leads you to ask a question that might unlock something for them. So where I can, I try, but I don't do it intrusively. It's more something's come up. You just said something now. Can I just check in on that and see where it goes?
Yeah. It's a real skill, that. It's a real skill. I work with a lot of people around kind of, one of the things we talk about is how do you actively listen to people and all the rest of it. And some people will say, oh, I'm a good listener. But then you hear them having conversations, and we love to fix things. We love to fix things. We love to give advice. I'm awful. I'm a terrible coach. I'll put that on camera. I'm a terrible coach because I just want to give people too much advice and get my 2 pence out there. But
I think one of the best things about being at Samaritans is the training that so I've done our core listening training, and it has fundamentally made me a better listener and made me more aware of the role I play. It's improved my ability to coach. What our volunteers do is a massively powerful thing. And I think so I kind of went through the training, I did the mentoring, and it was at the mentoring bit, I was like, I don't believe I personally have the emotional resilience and strength to be able to be on the phones. And so I massively commend them. But even just doing the training, I think has made me a better manager, a better person, better family man than I was before.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. You said about resilience there required. I wasn't going to necessarily ask you about the Samaritans, but you brought it up, so I'll pull that thread. So you said it takes a lot of emotional resilience to be on those phones and have some of those conversations. How do you support those individuals?
So I think that's something that we're looking at. Can we do it better right now? So the amazing thing about Samaritans and the volunteers that we've got is that they're not just on the phones. They provide support to the other Samaritans within they do listening leadership roles within there. So they do an enormous amount that goes above and beyond the listening they do. But I think the volunteer care teams that we have within our branches and the support they provide to people, both immediately as they come off shift to debrief, but then also to follow up or to be there when people might be triggered later on by some of the things that they've heard, I think is really powerful. But as always, with all organisations, we're asking ourselves currently, is there more that we could do to support our volunteers because of what they do for others?
Yeah. But I appreciate you looking at it. Look, I'm not going to throw any organisations under the bus here, but I have worked with some social media companies in the past, and they have a similar-ish role. People, typically young people, who are dealing with very difficult stories and things that they need to vet on that social media platform. And certainly the organisation I was working with at the time didn't do a huge amount to support those individuals. And look, I felt they were at legal risk, if I'm perfectly honest, of getting told off for that. But more than that, there's a moral responsibility, right, to look after people doing those sorts of roles.
I think absolutely is how do you care for the listeners? And I think the other element, I think, is also about creating an environment where people feel safe to be vulnerable and to share the fact that, they are finding it difficult and challenging, and so that we can support them as effectively as we can do. And it's not I don't think it's an easy thing to explore, and how do you do it at scale, and I think there's potentially an inner element around, I'm supporting people who are in, like emotional distress, etc. And therefore I've got to be strong. So helping people to be the space of being able to be open about how they're feeling. And I think the thing is we're really good at doing it in debriefing off shift and in the immediate follow-up in relation to a particularly challenging call. I think the question we're asking ourselves is there something more holistic that we could offer to ensure that we are, supporting our volunteers as effectively as we could do.
This episode is brought to you by Motorfinity. Motorfinity helps people working in frontline services access exclusive savings on a wide range of cars, with customers saving an average of £7,400.
Exclusive deals, total transparency, and a smoother experience every step of the way.
Yeah. Well, look, even the fact that you're questioning yourself on that, I think, puts you head and shoulders above a number of organisations that I've worked with who, it's too difficult. It's too difficult because there's no one right answer, is there? If there was something, you'd be doing it. If it was give people that and it'll suddenly solve the problem, you'd do it. But it's more complex than that. Definitely
more complex. I think definitely about understanding from an individual lens what people need, because different people will need different things as well. And so the ability for it to be flexible to other individuals, I think, is also really important.
Yeah, that came up a lot yesterday, actually, personalisation. And I'm a huge advocate of this. I don't know your thoughts on this, but I'll get your thoughts on this. I quite like the idea that health and safety is now aligning with well-being in a sense. There's some downsides to it, but one of the major upsides I see is almost this risk management approach. and this idea that, it's about the reduction of harm. However, where it falls down is the individual difference. 100 people fall off a ladder and 100 people get hurt, whereas 100 people have a really difficult call with someone. 50 might be absolutely fine. 20 might need a little bit of support. 20 might really, really struggle. So it's that individual nature of it that makes it difficult.
Yeah, I think also your own personal lived experience might mean that certain conversations might be more triggering to you than others.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I honestly, I cannot celebrate enough, not only the work our volunteers do in terms of being there for the public 24/7, but also the unbelievable camaraderie and support they provide each other within that branch setting.
Are they typically in person, or do they do it remotely as well?
No, so at the moment it's all done in person.
Right.
So they physically go into the branch to go on shift. One of the things that and that's in terms of the phone calls, one of the things we're testing at the moment is whether or not people are able to answer calls from home. And interestingly, in order to give ourselves the confidence that it's a safe and effective process in terms of what we're testing, we are putting in a range and degree of support measures. This is why we're questioning whether we could do other stuff. And there is a bit of us which is wondering, are some of the things that we're putting in place for people who will be listening remotely from a home-based location, could some of those things be applied for those people who are listening irrespective of whether they're in branch and in person or not? So I think it's going to be a fascinating exploration for us. If we manage to unlock it and we're able to do it, then I think what we'll end up with is more volunteers will be able to be there at the, in terms of the hours of need, which we see, overnight calls where the call rate drops, but the numbers of people in significant distress increases proportionally. And so being able to have more people on the phones overnight would be easier if people were able to do it, but equally from home. But equally, we need to make sure that those people are, in a safe and well supported and quality assured environment. So both the caller gets a good quality experience, but also that the volunteer who's taking that call is appropriately supported in delivering it. So yeah, all of those things going on at the moment.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it's, you're at home, you've had a really difficult call, you put the phone down and you're on your own, right? And you don't necessarily have that. So it's how do you put those? Yeah. So yes, you want to be able to sometimes just turn to someone and say, flipping out, that was hard, and let's have a conversation about it. Let's just debrief somewhat. But there must be ways to build that sort of support in remotely as well.
I mean, what I've seen in terms of the structure for the pilot, I think is brilliant. And it's more resource intensive. Yeah. But actually, I think the experience for those volunteers, and particularly our knowledge that those volunteers are more likely to have a higher degree of distressed calls coming through, will hopefully give us things that we can learn, not only to ensure that hopefully we're able to roll that out in a safe and quality assured way, but also that we might learn stuff that we could then apply to all elements of the listening we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So is that what you were here talking about today?
No.
Something completely different.
It's completely different. You took me off a tangent on that one, but I've done a bit around how do you create a really meaningfully inclusive workplace, how are the things that you need to think about into consideration of that. We've got a conversation later on where we're talking about health and well-being within the workplace and the workplace environment. And I think I think there's a growing recognition of the importance of attending to and thinking about people's mental health and well-being. But I don't think necessarily we've fully understood what a hybrid remote working environment means and our ability to actually redesign work in an environment where actually now it is easier for people to conceal challenges that they're facing personally. It's easier for people to continue to work when they're unwell and maybe they shouldn't be working, or for people to feel higher degrees of stress or anxiety about the nature of their work because they are, in essence, working 1 degree separated from their wider team and they're not getting that interpersonal support on an ongoing daily basis. So I think there are a number of questions for us that flexible working and hybrid working bring enormous benefits, but have we considered some of the potential negative implications on an individual basis and designed it in a way to provide the appropriate safeguards?
It's an interesting, that's probably a whole episode on itself, right? That, because COVID opened Pandora's box with that, didn't it? It was just everyone was thrown into this remote hybrid working world, and we didn't necessarily have time to plan for it and design it in the way that perhaps we could or should have. And now it's almost playing a little bit of catch up, I guess.
Well, I think there is an element around, I feel that we demonstrated our ability to actually adjust and adapt. So if we'd said universally we all need to move to a home working environment in a 2-week turnaround, everyone would have said it's not possible.
Yeah.
So if we'd posed the question, the answer would have been no. But the fact that we did it because we had compulsion, I think demonstrates our ability to rapidly evolve and to put things in place that are workable. But then once you get beyond that initial shift and transition, I think there's a responsibility in all of us. And I think it's a conversation that's been needed to be had for decades, in that we've fallen into this habit and way and practice of working that was established over 100 years ago, and nothing has changed. And actually the reality is we've evolved as a society. Digital capability has transformed the way we can interact and connect with each other.
Yeah.
So actually the reality is that we are in a fundamentally different world now than we were when I left school at the end of the 20th century. So why are we still thinking about work in a 19th, 20th century mindset when we live in a 21st century world?
Yeah. I love that. I'm not saying my dad was born in the 19th century, but no, I speak to my dad, and a few months ago, and I was talking about work intensity and how everyone's so busy at the moment. And he said, well, so he's semi-retired now, but he said, well, when I started work, we used to send letters. We used to send a letter to a client. So you'd write a letter, you'd send it, and you might get a response in a week's time.
Yeah.
Now it's just instant messaging, instant Teams, the email, all the rest of it. And we were never trained or taught how to do that. We just had to adapt.
Well, I think our education system's is letting us down. And it's letting down the next generation. So if we think about, children being discouraged from AI usage, the plagiarism concept, how has this been for? But the reality is that your need to retain knowledge, the way we test kids these days, A-levels, GCSEs, is can you hold a whole load of knowledge in your head and regurgitate it on demand to a particular question?
Yeah.
That skill's not needed anymore. But we are still educating the next generation in that, rather than evolving, well, what does good look like now? So I can get information, I can work much more efficiently than I've ever been able to do before, and bring more value add. And our ability to have a conversation around, right, what does the future of work look like? What is the likely skills that we're going to need people to be bringing into the workforce from entry level through to senior executive level? And then how do we train and develop for that now, rather than effectively a lazy transition into a space where we're talking about, well, we'll automate all the entry level roles. Well, that's great. Automate all the entry level roles. And then in 10 years' time, when you're trying to appoint middle managers, where are they going to come from?
Yeah, absolutely. Massive gap.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, scratch the surface of a huge topic there. We'll have to do another episode to completely revamp the education system, I think. But I think I make you spot on there. Why? Yeah, I can remember when the Magna Carta was written, because I learned it in school. But although I'm not sure I do know. But did I learn how to connect with others? Did I learn how to do that well remotely, to work in groups, to... Yeah.
And I think that whole thing about working well remotely and working in groups, I think that what we are seeing is organizations are experiencing people who are valuing the flexibility that hybrid working gives them, and the balance it gives them in terms of their lives, and the savings it makes them in terms of commute. They are connecting more intently with their teams because there's the specific unit they're working with, and the human connections and relationships there are probably stronger.
Yeah.
But their connection into the wider organization, their understanding, their development, their exposure to other things, their ability to be curious, all of those skills are being dialed down and are not being valued. And it requires us to fundamentally redesign a working environment. And the whole, we've got organizations that are making these return to the office mandates, but then you've got banks upon banks of people who go into an office every day to sit on Teams calls or answer emails.
What's the point? Yes.
They're not interacting. So I think there is a new way of delivering stuff in the service industry. We just need to be bold enough and brave enough to experiment as to what that might be.
Yeah. Well, look, we're out of time. I feel like I could speak to you for like 2 hours more. I've got so many questions in my head. I'll tell you what, I'll push you for like an incredibly quick answer, just because I've asked a number of people, and you do a role in this space. Professionalizing standards for well-being leaders. So people doing jobs like yourself, or a well-being leader, or a well-being manager. Do we need an agreed standard for them, akin to, at the far end, being a doctor, maybe not so much being a CIPD professional? Or does that risk gatekeeping these jobs from diverse voices?
I think it depends on what you're testing for and what you're trying to hold people to. So I think that, if we take, professional qualifications as an example, do you run the risk of it becoming almost like a procession of tick boxes of can you do X, can you do Y, rather than do you have the flexibility and the blend of skills that are required for you to excel? So I wouldn't necessarily go there. I think the question for me is what the problem we're trying to solve. And if it's about quality assurance of people doing those roles, do you need a qualification in order to give you that? Or is there another route through which you can demonstrate that you've got that capability?
Love it. As a psychologist, that's the answer I want to hear. That's the answer I want to hear. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again sometime. But enjoy the rest of your day at the event. And thanks very much.
Cheers. Thanks, Matt.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Working Wellbeing Podcast, recorded live at Health and Wellbeing at Work 2026. This episode was part of the Full Tank Thinking series, sponsored by Motifinity. For more great episodes, click the link on screen now. And for more information about Motifinity and the work they do, check out the link in the description below.